Welcome to the First Church in Chestnut Hills, May 3rd, 2020 service. Welcome for the first time, welcome for the 100th time. We'll begin with two readings. The first is from the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our second reading is from the book of Genesis, chapter 4, verses 8 to 15. Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let us go out to the field." And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And he said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it will no longer yield to you its strength. You will be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Today you have driven me away from the soil, and I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and anyone who meets me may kill me." Then the Lord said to him, "Not so. Whoever kills Cain will suffer a sevenfold vengeance." And the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who came upon him would kill him. So ends the reading. We heard, "Then the Lord said to Cain, 'Where is your brother Abel?' He said, 'I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?'" The book of Genesis is a book of beginnings, of firsts. The first day, the first creation, the first man, the first woman, and Cain, the first child, also the first liar and the first murderer. He may have been the first person to be angry, the first person to be jealous, angry and jealous because God seemed to favor Abel over him. Cain was also the first criminal, branded with the so-called mark of Cain that would warn anyone approaching not to harm him. It does make you wonder, though, who was it that was going to harm him? He was the fourth person in the world. I mean, the third person in the world. He just killed the fourth, leaving only his parents. His brother Seth was not yet born. And then Cain goes off to the land of Nod to find a wife, later in the story. Who was over in the land of Nod? How exactly did they get there? This line of thinking assumes that we are to use the book of Genesis as a text of history rather than a source for morality. The actions of Cain, and for that matter, the actions of Adam and Eve, are to be understood as what we're supposed to do, or not do, rather than what anyone ever did. Cain spoke to God after killing his brother. He lies to God. He tries to deflect the questions. I don't know where Abel is. The first lie was not a terribly convincing one, especially when you realize it was being told to God. Cain then says, I am my brother's keeper. The first two times the word keeper, the English word keeper, appears in the Bible, it is within this first book of the Bible, Genesis. The first usage, it's when Abel is referred to as a keeper of sheep, a shepherd, in comparison to Cain, who is a tiller of the soil, or a farmer. The second time the word is used, it is by Cain in this exchange with God. The word keeper is used in both sentences in English, but it would have been different in Hebrew. The first would have been ra'ah, which means one who tends or feeds. The second would be shamer, and it means to guard or to watch or to pay heed. Abel tends to the animals, and his sacrifice was found to be pleasing to God. Cain tells God that he's not responsible for guarding or watching over Abel, tasks for which we know Cain was eminently ill-suited. The word keeper in English implies both of these ideas, caring for and watching over. It links together the responsibilities of a caretaker and a watchman. Have we somehow changed the story as we translate it into English? Because we know Abel and Cain are very different kinds of keepers. There's even a suggestion from a tradition that Cain was conceived in the Garden of Eden, but was born outside of it, after that unfortunate incident between his parents and a serpent. Conceived in paradise before the fall, Cain somehow falls even farther away from paradise. Adam and Eve disobeyed God by eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But Cain violates an even greater rule, one that was perhaps unspoken at the time, resulting in a crime that has been unspeakable throughout time. And yet even then, God does not wish for Cain to be killed. Is God protecting Cain or causing his punishment to last longer? That's a philosophical question for another day. Instead, what are we to make of Cain's question? Am I my brother's keeper? Am I responsible for guarding over, for watching over someone else? Family, friends, strangers. What about caring for or tending to them? Those two different ideas from Hebrew suggest different ways of keeping, a distinction we don't have in English. When Cain suggests that he is not his brother's keeper, we know we're supposed to go in the opposite direction. The Bible can be subtle in its messages, but this one is clearly out there. Do not follow the example of the first murderer. And also notice that even after this terrible act, God refuses to see Cain harmed. Cain lives on as a cautionary tale. From this passage, we can take that tending and caring as done by Abel is good. His efforts were pleasing to God. We can also draw the conclusion that we are our brother's keepers for the opposite reasons. Our brothers, our sisters, our kin. We have a responsibility for these others. Why do we have these obligations? Well, that's a good question. There is an old saying that even a journey of 10,000 miles begins with a single step. So the beginning is important because it often will define what comes next. We start with a direction in mind, east, west, north, south. We begin with a purpose, we begin with an objective, we begin with a destination. It could be going to the store, or it could be, the start of a voyage of self-discovery. These days, it's probably about going to the store. Like the first step in a journey, the first steps in our thinking matter. Every set of ethics, every school of philosophy, every religious tradition begins somewhere. When we consider the stories in the book of Genesis, we are reading central aspects of the Jewish religious tradition, its sources of ethics and philosophy. At the core, there is an expectation of caring for one another, guarding those around us. And once you begin with mutual obligations, everything unfolds building on that sense of fundamental connection. The good examples are about the helpful and the vigilant. The bad examples are about the misers and the rogues. The same notion of first steps could be applied to Christianity. The first step, the first concern in our minds will often change the trajectory of where we're going. Jesus and other teachers from this time were trying to start a moral journey, a new one. First century religion was frequently about doing the right rituals, making the appropriate sacrifices. And that was true in the Roman temples as well as the Temple of Jerusalem. I once read a description of a Roman temple offering. It involved very complicated recitations and gestures, animals of certain types for sacrifice, which were offerings of great cost. This was all done to please the gods, and it had to be done perfectly. Any mistake, any faltering, and the whole effort might be wasted. And how would you know it was wasted? Because you didn't get what you were seeking. Victory in battle, rains on your fields, whatever. If a religion is built upon efforts to please the heavens, this is a glimpse at what it might look like. Christianity has splintered into a wide variety of denominations. Each has its own distinguishing characteristics, great and small. But again, the first step will often determine the subsequent journey. If, for example, the first concern is accepting Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, the following steps will probably be to assure that others achieve a similar moment of acceptance. If instead your first concern is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself, the following steps in that journey will be to cultivate a spirit of love. A spirit of love inside yourself and a spirit of love in the communities we build. That is not to say that these ideas are mutually exclusive, but it can be difficult to keep two ultimate priorities in mind. To steal some basic sports advice, if we are told to keep our eye on the ball, it can be difficult to find our mom in the stands. But which is ultimately more important, your mom or the ball? Sunday football or your spouse, your work or your family, your soul or the love of God? Again, none of those comparisons are mutually exclusive. If we are to name an ultimate concern, if we're to decide on a first step, it's worth, though, taking a moment to focus. Not to cast aside all these priorities that we have to juggle in life, like work and family, but to ask the foundational question, why are we doing all of this? Who are we doing it for? For God, for ourselves, for those we love, for those we are called upon to love. The pandemic has had many strange effects. For some of us, it's about working in overdrive without a moment to think. You, by the way, are in my prayers. For others, it's a huge pause from many of our usual activities. If you're in that second group, then I would ask you to honor the work of the first by looking deeply at these questions. When nearly everything has to shut down, certain activities continue because we deem them essential. These are various facets of the definition of what it means to be a keeper, one who cares for and tends, one who protects, one who guards. That does not mean all those other activities and occupations were no importance. Not at all. We all will need to see the barber in the coming weeks and months, some of us sooner than others. But if we were to lift up what is necessary for life, we end up with questions of how we care and tend and keep one another. Everything else will come back in time, but it's worth lifting up what we have found to be truly essential. It's no secret that American society has been somewhat fractured over the past few years. Divergent opinions, vigorous disagreements, no sense of overlapping interests, no sense of shared goals. You can define those differences however you want, draw the lines wherever you desire. But in this weird moment, there is an extremely broad consensus about what is going on. The vast majority of Americans seem to be agreeing for once, agreeing that we need to work together in a time of crisis, agreeing that we need to protect one another from the spread of a dangerous disease, agreeing that we have to take care of those who are ill, those who are unemployed, those who are struggling. When you live in a world filled with noise and suddenly there is an unexpected silence, it is amazing what you can finally hear. It's amazing what seemed so important, so pressing 2 months ago, that it's barely at the bottom of the list of all of these newfound priorities and newfound commonalities. And I realize that's not a unanimous opinion, but if we were to wait around for everyone to agree, we'd be waiting for the sun to grow cold. The majority of people facing this crisis have turned their minds to different things. Yes, they're worried about their health, but they're also worried about their neighbor across the street. What their kids are up to, what their mom and dad are getting on. Are my friends okay? Is my family all right? What about those doctors and nurses, those people at the store, the person on the television who got sick? What about them? Well, last week my daughter turned 21. She did so in quarantine with her dad, the height of excitement. She would, hopefully, in another moment, have been able to go out to celebrate with her friends, not sitting in the house nursing her first legal drink with her dad. We ordered a nice dinner, but she really had no appetite for it. She was feeling kind of down. She was feeling, honestly, depressed. She went up to bed early. A while later, she comes down and she is crying. And I have no idea what's wrong. She says, "They're here." Again, baffled dad. What? My friends, they're here. They're on the lawn. Her friends from home, 30 or so miles away, had driven to see her. One had made a sign saying, "Happy 21st birthday." My daughter is now in the driveway, sobbing and laughing and thanking them. Her friends are yelling and whooping it up in their cars, which I am sure went entirely unnoticed on my very quiet street. Apologies, dear neighbors, but it was for a good cause. The next day, we drove up to see her grandparents. They wanted to be the first ones to buy her a legal drink. Please don't tell them they were the second. They set out glasses of champagne on the trunk of their car and they stepped back. My ex-wife was there as well. We all grabbed our glasses and kept our distance in the driveway. But it seemed close enough. We wore masks, which made drinking quite a bit of a challenge, and there we toasted my daughter on her 21st birthday. It was not exactly the family gathering we would have had in years past, but in a strange way it seemed even better. I know we're tired of being inside, of not being able to do the things that we want to do. I know that it's so hard on people, let alone the economy. I know some are still straight out with work while others are bored out of their minds sitting at home. And I know amidst all of that, people remain concerned. They remain afraid. Many are sick. Many are grieving. But if we are to keep and to care for those we care about, to protect those around us, we must be careful what we wish for and certainly careful of the next steps that we take. For these reasons, I am so grateful for our local leaders in Massachusetts. Usually I would pray on Sundays for those in authority, so now I will do so. I pray for Governor Baker of Massachusetts. I pray for Mayor Walsh of Boston. I pray for Mayor Fuller of Newton. I pray for the leaders of Brookline and Newton and Boston and all the surrounding towns. I pray for the leaders who are the keepers all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and New England, our country and our world. I pray for those who are tending and who are caring, those who are protecting, those who are guarding. I pray for those who are living and breathing out the message to love God and to love one another in all that they do. May they be replenished with God's grace. I pray for them and I offer my thanks to God for them. And I also pray for those who are not so inclined. I pray that they be reminded of those lessons of love found in the Bible, those examples of good stewards and faithful keepers, those cautionary tales about anger and selfishness and pride and greed. I pray that they may in time incline to God's will and come to walk in God's ways, that our land may be led into paths of peace and of righteousness, to the glory of God's name and as a reflection of God's love. May we each remember to be keepers of one another, caring and protecting those we love and those around us in this world. For this world is a gift from God, and its blessings are the gifts we have to share with all of creation. After a sermon like this, in which we talk about what it means to be together, let us end by praying together. Please join me in saying the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Our service is ended. May our service to God and to one another never end. Go in peace, my friends. Be well, and God bless. Goodbye.